Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining me and taking the time for part two of A Bright and Healthy Future in the Midst of Pandemics, where I'm going to go over some of the key points to what is it that we can do in this particular time of our lives to ensure health and well-being and the sustainability of our health and well-being. So just to recap what we discussed and went over in the previous recording, the session where we did part one, we discussed how COVID and other viruses, bacteria, microbes, how they survive and how they're transmitted, the statistics and the mortality rate of COVID. And basically, we came to a number of conclusions, and they revolve around the fact that COVID, yes, definitely of pandemic proportions, to say the very least, and definitely has devastating effects. It is and was not novel. And so what are we to do as epidemiologists are asserting that this is not the first and not the last? Microbes are also growing smart. So what are we to do in regards to this? And so we're going to go on to the do's of what the recommendations are. So we're going to start with the do's of maintaining a healthy body. So my intention for all of us is to open up to the understanding that we have, the knowledge and the understanding that we need to lead healthy lives. And so I encourage us and hope that you'll use what I share with you and move forward in making healthy, wise, and informed decisions for yourselves and your families, especially our children who are in need right now of so much guidance and to have their bodies blessed with immunity and the ability to grow properly and develop properly. So let's begin with the first section of our do's. And please, I've seen many people who are in of course, their state of panic and concern and fear, just covering up all the time, using face masks all the time, whether they're social distancing or not, whether they are at home or not. Whether they are within 6 feet or not. And the truth of the matter is we require fresh air. And so we also require a certain level of exposure, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later, which I term measured exposure, not in the sense that we are able to measure it, but in the sense that it's not a full-blown exposure, meaning to the extent of being exposed to someone who's ill. And so please, I ask you that, with the best intentions, allow yourself, and especially children and elders, to go outdoors as the weather improves and gets better, especially breathe in the fresh air, enjoy the sunlight. It helps improve the immune system. Of course, we all know that it improves the absorbency of vitamin D. It helps improve our mood. And truth be told, we require exposure to various microbes, which are in the air, microbes, allergens, whatever they may be. And so it actually stimulates a healthy immune system. That's the reason, one of the leading reasons why children will place things in their mouths. And as they're developing, they do so in order to not only expose themselves, but to stimulate an immune response and, in effect, to make the entire world their friend. And so let's befriend our world. Let's befriend our environment. We were created and in a way that we are to survive. Survival is one of our main concerns. And so let's trust that we have what it takes to encounter microbes and to overcome and develop an immune response. And that's not to say that we should throw caution to the wind, because of course we must remain wise and treat every interaction and every experience with a level of wisdom. It's just, let's also trust our bodies and make wise decisions. So And just looking recently, the New York Times this past weekend put out an article where they encouraged us, where they're sharing with us that they think going outside is important for our health, and they know that being outdoors lowers the risk for transmission. Governor Cuomo put out the statistics that 66% of those who were hospitalized for the corona infection were in fact at home, and only 2% were homeless and exposed to the elements of our world. And so we can see that that's very important for us. Now, also here, another part of the same article is explaining to us that outdoors, in these instances where we are in a pandemic, is in almost all cases better than indoors. And what is the point of that? So that was by engineering professor Lindsay Marr from Virginia Tech. And she explains to us, and I can show this in the form of an image, of a very basic image. She explains something called the viral load. And what the viral load is, when you are exposed, for example, in a droplet, let's consider this a droplet, to someone who is infected, you may have a very large, concentrated, hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands and even more of these microbes in a droplet. And so basically, in effect, a very simple sketch, you would have this. And under these circumstances, when you're directly in contact with someone who is infected and who is producing these mucus secretions, these secretions from their cough and in their spit, that's what we need to be most concerned about. And of course, our healthcare workers are trained to handle this in the hospital settings, and so on and so forth. Myself being a nurse also, it can be exposed to direct contact with these things. And so it's an understanding that sick people or people who are infected are able to transmit because of the virility, the virus load, so to speak. And so a person who is healthy, or a person who is not showing signs of infection or is otherwise mounting a good immune response, and that means they have little to no symptoms, their droplet might appear to be something like this. So if you can see, you might see a few of my dots here on the page, and that's representative of having just a few of the microbes. And it says here that a single virus, and this is by City University of New York physicist, and his name is Eugene Chudnovsky, explains that a single virus will not make anyone sick. It will be immediately destroyed by the immune system, and the belief is that one needs a few hundred to a few thousands of it. And it's not only COVID, this is so for every single bacterial and viral infection. There is a certain pressure, a certain load that the body needs to be exposed to in order to mount a full-blown infection. And so when we get this particular amount, that is like a blessing to our system, because basically what it does is gives our body an understanding of what foreign microbes are in the atmosphere that the body needs to watch for. And so it is better equipped, if it were to encounter this, it is better equipped to mount the adequate response to keep our bodies healthy. And so we may mount a response, but it will be far less severe. And this is exactly the technique that is followed by a vaccine. What the vaccine does is gives us a certain amount of either a live virus or bacteria, or a replicated bit of it, like an RNA portion of it, just to stimulate the body. And so basically, in essence, when we go outside and we allow ourselves what I term measured exposure, we are in effect giving ourselves a free and non-chemical form of a vaccine, exposing the body to what is in the elements and allowing our body to, in effect, mount a healthy response. So we can also see right here in the same article that they did a study of more than 7,300 cases in China, and just one was connected to outdoor transmission. So my heartfelt request for everybody, in order to maintain a healthy body and a healthy system, for those of you who are healthy, is please go outside, expose your children. Definitely, if you are in the midst of people who may be ill, or if you come across people who you suspect might be ill, or you feel you might yourself be developing the illness, then by all means ensure safe distancing, 6 feet and greater, wear face coverings, and avoid crowded places. Also, as precautionary measures, yes, absolutely. Let's listen to our political authorities and follow the precautions, and definitely wear face coverings when we are in crowded places, which means public transportation, supermarkets, pharmacies, post offices, and things like that. But when we're outdoors, let's encourage a healthy approach, and so on. So obviously, please, let's continue to cover our nose and mouth. If we are sneezing or coughing, that is one of the most considerate and compassionate things that we could be doing for ourselves and others. And also, let's now move on. If you can, by all means, avoid cramped, crowded, and poorly ventilated spaces, because I've had patients who were so fearful and so concerned, they would say they have refused to open their windows in the belief that they would avoid bringing the contagion or the virus in from the outside, when in essence, that might actually be incredibly weakening our immune system when we're closing ourselves off, and then we finally do go out and our body is bombarded now. It may become overloaded, and so that approach might not be the best. And so avoid poorly ventilated spaces, and definitely allow yourselves to go out and get fresh air. Let's definitely protect our elderly and immunocompromised populations by, again, maintaining safe distancing and avoiding direct contact if we believe that we may be ill. Wearing gloves is definitely important when we're handling or believing that we're handling contaminated surfaces or coming in contact with infected persons. And this is most important when there may be an infected family member, or for those of us who are in healthcare and already know this, and are working in a healthcare facility. Again, some things in the New York Times on the weekend article, important. Let's not share food, utensils, or beverages. Let's avoid large gatherings, and keep a safe distance from those we are not directly involved in or come in contact with. So please, let's perform proper hand hygiene. That is one of the greatest ways to avoid infections. And moving on very rapidly. So yes, please save yourselves the time and avoid disinfecting or being fearful of accepting packages, because Cleveland Clinic put out this interesting article where Dr. Esper from the Cleveland Clinic explains the virus typically doesn't like to live on surfaces that have a lot of holes or microscopic little grooves, nooks, or crannies. So we're talking about surfaces that are more smooth, glass, and so on, plastic, things like that, metal. And so, yeah, there is no worry about possibly catching it from this way, from packages, from cardboard, and things like that. And also, let's keep in mind that when the virus does land on something, it is in essence already beginning to die. As you can see here, Dr. Esper from the Cleveland Clinic goes on to say that we may be able to find some viable virus after a few days, but it's thousands of times less than what was originally deposited by a cough. And this, we mean infectious cough, someone with an active full-blown infection. And so as soon as that virus hits something that's not alive and certainly not human, that it just begins to die out. And so just because there may be viruses, and there always are microbes on these surfaces. Let's not kid ourselves. There always are and will be microbes on these surfaces. It does not necessarily mean that there are enough of them to make us sick. And again, hand hygiene is essential and is key. So it says here that the exact infectious dose is still being worked out. But again, the most concern is when we are coming in direct contact with people who are actively infected and not covering their cough or their sneezes, because it is in those droplet particles that we are most susceptible for transmitting anything. And so I'm going to end here with the first portion of part 2 and continue on with some other really cool advice that some of which you know and some of which may be new. So talk to you soon. Bye-bye.